Well, good morning and welcome to InfoDay Texas. My name is Kyle Goehring, Head of Sustainability at Turner & Townsend, and it is my extreme pleasure to introduce our panel and allow them some time to introduce themselves and the roles that they have. But kicking this off, this panel will focus on, as Ken mentioned, projects and programs to protect a climate risk vulnerable Texas. So certainly this is in your program, but just highlighting a few facts for this. Texas experiences 60 dangerous high heat days annually, and these days affect 840,000 people. As Texans, we know that these days are increasing in their frequency and intensity, and they need to be addressed. And how we address those comes through a series of projects and programs, and our panel will talk about what they're doing to address some of these issues. On the other hand, obviously, we have extreme cold sometimes and unprecedented events that occur, including 4 weeks ago here in Austin, and that freeze and some of the impacts that took place in the city. So we'll talk about that and address that. But a nation capturing event, or actually a global event, was the Great Freeze nearly 2 years ago, or over 2 years ago now, and how that took down Texas's grid and the impact. So we see these events, we know that they're affecting people, they're affecting livelihoods, and they need to be addressed. But how you address them is not easy and isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So we will address those one by one at various levels in administration. So a little bit of background on me, and then I'll pass the mic over to Joanna and then Mark. Murray, one of our panelists, is running slightly behind. We'll be here shortly, but we have Salvador as well. And different backgrounds, as you'll hear, and how they will address these issues. So once again, my name is Kyle with Turner & Townsend. Turner & Townsend, for those of you that do not know, is a project, program, and controls management company. We focus on very large infrastructure projects as well as other types of projects. My role is to apply that project and program management and cost management toward decarbonized solutions. So looking at these massive issues, 2040, 2050 net zero goals, how do you accomplish those? Well, they're through a series of small projects or interventions. And so we seek to establish the right strategy with our clients to put together a framework that will deliver a solution. And it is an iterative process. So something may be done next quarter, next year, the following year, but these small projects allow us to get momentum and overall hit our end goal. When you look at net zero, that's front of mind for a lot of organizations and entities right now. They have an established program or path forward, they believe, but we come in and we really check that. We make sure that it encompasses all of the different elements of that. Increasing costs of carbon, water scarcity, which Brooke talked about in the earlier panel, as well as supply chain constraints. What does that look like when you look at new concrete, steel, et cetera? So to that point, a lot of applicable intelligence we can bring to our clients and help them, whether it be an airport, which Travis will be speaking on later today, and some of our sustainable aviation work, or massive pipelines, roadways, ports, et cetera. So on that point, I will hand the mic over to Joanna and allow her to introduce herself, her role, and we'll move down the line here to Mark, and then Salvador and Murray will be joining us soon.
Great, thank you. I am Johanna Arendt, and I'm the Community Resiliency Project Manager at Travis County. Our program has only existed for about a year. We're brand new, and we look at reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as increasing resiliency within the Travis County community.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Mark Kuder. I am with the Office of Resilience at the City of Austin. We've been around for 9 months. We hired on a Chief Resilience Officer about 9 months ago. Before that, I was a decade with the Office of Sustainability looking at climate impacts on our assets and operations, and we'll get into that in a second. Before I pass it on, though, we will end with an uplifting note between the number of deaths on land and the needs we have. I think we do want to sort of end on a positive note about how we can make a difference.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Salvador Lopez. I'm the Chief Environmental Officer of the North American Development Bank, or NADBank. NADBank was created back in 1994 by the governments of the United States and Mexico during the time where NAFTA was being negotiated, and there were concerns about how NAFTA would have environmental impacts along the border as commerce and economic activity, and as well as demographic pressures increase. So we have a mandate to help develop and finance environmental infrastructure projects. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. I think I said I'm the Chief Environmental Officer for the bank, so my role is to endorse that all the projects that we finance do have an environmental component, not only that they meet environmental regulations, but that they go beyond the regulations to actually have an environmental impact. And I'll be talking about that as well a little bit later. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm Murray Myers with the City of San Antonio. So our organization is fairly large, 13,000 employees, 40 departments, annual budget of about $3.4 billion. I work within the Office of Sustainability. Prior to that, I worked with the City of Dallas, City of Fort Worth, and also with the City of Houston. By far, the City of San Antonio is the best organization I've worked with so far.
All right, so as you hear, we have some great panelists, different backgrounds, different perspectives, some new roles and some new programs, which I think highlight the need for climate resiliency and the opportunity that we have before us here in the state. So kicking off, Johanna, 1 year into this program, if you will, when you look at Travis County, obviously growing population, a lot of interest. I was at a conference earlier this week, and Austin is top 5 market for almost any investment. And so there's a lot of growth here. And to that point, you look at some great opportunity that can come from all of this population growth and some of the infrastructure that needs to be built. But going back a couple of years to the Great Freeze that took place in 2021, how did Travis County, one, respond at that moment? And then fast forward 2 years now, and like I said, a lot of interest here. What projects are you putting in place as a part of a larger program to adapt to climate change?
Sure. So, I think the Winter Storm Uri 2 years ago was a shock to just about every system, right? And was coming on the heels of and still in the middle of another giant shock, which was COVID. And so I think the last bunch of years have really shown some of the cracks in the system, so to speak, and shown also as we're growing where the growing pains are, and with climate change projected to just bring more and more and more of these shocks and stressors. A lot of leaders and policymakers have been looking at how do we get ahead of this? How do we really understand what we're heading for? And, all of us in this room know how long it takes to get a project done, right? So we need to look at really far in advance what we're going to need and get those wheels rolling now. And so part of the response to Uri was the creation of my program. And one of the first things that we're doing is looking in-house. How is Travis County infrastructure, services, facilities prepared for the things to come? And, we're unlucky in Texas where we have almost all of the threats, right? We've got extreme cold and extreme heat, extreme drought and flooding. We've got the storms. We've got just about everything except for, y'all on the coast have coastal rise. Here in Central Texas, we're lucky to not have to have that added to the list. But I really, really feel for y'all on the coast for dealing with those challenges. And so we need to make sure that all of the vital services that Travis County is providing will be able to continue to be provided through all of those shocks and stresses. So we're actually working right now on an interlocal agreement with Texas State, with the Institute for Government Innovation, to look at everything, every aspect of Travis County to understand how we can be more resilient and what the challenges are going to be. And we're also, working on better understanding in the community, doing a lot of interviewing, a lot of meetings, a lot of looking at existing research to better understand what's already working in terms of both disaster response and resiliency. And, we kind of talk about it as like a watershed, right? So disaster response is the flood that happens, but there's a lot that can happen up in the watershed, up in the headwaters, to help make things less bad when that rain event does come. So our program really looks further up in those headwaters at the opportunities to work with the community, to build partnerships, to educate, and to, look at ways that what is the county's role? How can we make the biggest difference? How can we leverage the resources and the relationships that we have? So that's where we're going with it.
Lots of great work there. And I really like the development and the partnership there that you have with Texas State. So that's really great highlighting that. Mark, obviously Austin is in Travis County, but at different sets of issues, and different focus as well. To that point, how is the city focusing on this maybe a little bit differently than Travis County? And then most recently with some of the power outages with the ice as well that built up recently.
Yeah, I mean, I guess first we're really lucky to have Johanna at the Travis County level, sort of helping us think beyond our borders. I don't know if you've ever seen the boundaries of Austin, the city limit. It doesn't make any sense. And people are sort of confused about where Austin ends and where Travis County starts, or not. You guys are everywhere. But like, and then also if you look at that boundary, the people who are most susceptible and most vulnerable to climate change are people who live on that fringe of suburbia and rural areas. So for us as a city, we have to start focusing on who is most vulnerable and starting investing in places that with the greatest need, right? I think early in the presentation before us, they said, we build roads, but really we build a quality of life. Well, who's that quality of life for? And how do we start to invest in areas to help people where they need it? So for us, we have our energy company, Austin Energy. We have Austin Water. We have an airport. We manage and build roads. We have public facilities, health centers, rec centers, libraries, et cetera. We have a lot of stuff. All this stuff is focused on the community. So what we've done in like maybe 8 years ago, we started to look at all of this, identify what the critical assets are, which in itself is a huge discussion because for utilities, all assets are critical. So we had to sort of go through this process of like, how do you identify it? And then we sort of looked at exposure. At the time it was heat, drought, flood, wildfire, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. And through this process, we started to sort of think about, okay, so where are these critical infrastructure most vulnerable and how do we start to build it up? That was before Winter Storm Uri. At the time, departments were on board, but they're like, well, climate change is in the future. And then Winter Storm Uri happened and everything changed. Everybody's like, oh my God, we're getting hammered by the press. Politicians are like, what are you doing? Why aren't you doing more? So now all these departments are feeling this sense of urgency. We talked about this growth in the last panel. Now we're sort of feeling this urgency of emergency. Even today, we activated the Emergency Operations Center because we're about to have big storms come through. And we don't know if it's going to be a slight storm or it's going to be a huge storm. Winter Storm Uri, within 24 hours, it went from like, hey, this might be kind of cold, might get a little bit of snow, to, oh my God, we're going to get like 6 inches in 7 days of cold weather. Same with Winter Storm Mara. So what we need to do is ramp it up. Right. Look at what our assets are, look at how we can sort of rethink building those assets in the future so that they're better prepared for extreme events. But on the flip side, ensuring those assets are designed in a way to make sure that people are safe and secure where they are at home.
Great point. We'll touch on that further, Mark, about how do you plan for the grid of the future or for future needs today and the costs, risks, and benefits associated with that. So skipping over Salvador for the moment, going over there to Murray. And Murray, great background, various cities that you've worked in, participated in, and helped lead that growth and resiliency and sustainability in those roles. Focusing a bit on heat, if you will, in the city of San Antonio. How are you building a program and series of projects to adapt to this increasing number of high heat days and the intensity of those?
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, given the year we had last summer, it's difficult to track all the records we broke. It was the hottest May, June, and July on record. Number one for days over 90, number two for days over 100 at 58. Also the second lowest number of inches in terms of rainfall. So we were dealing with extreme heat and extreme drought. That sparked a couple of new things for the city. The city manager's office developed a urban heat island task force, which is really important because if you look at the city of San Antonio, 500 square miles, and you imagine it as a giant puzzle, each department has a different set of pieces. And if each department is trying to solve the puzzle with their own set of pieces, they're never really going to truly achieve anything. Our greatest chance of solving that puzzle is with all the departments working together. For example, Parks is over tree canopy, Public Works is over cool pavement. We have another department over cool roofs. And so the idea of the task force was getting about 10 departments together to start looking at a cohesive strategy and then using all of our available data sets to identify hotspots within the city. Where are we going to focus on first, based on extreme heat and based on equity? And then on top of that, one of our council members also was able to pass a climate action fund. It's about $8 to $10 million per year just for climate action. There's a couple of eligible categories. One of those is urban heat islands. And then also, because of the summer we saw, it kind of accelerated our cool pavement pilots. So we're looking at 10 pilots, one in each council district, again, based on equity and heat. We've identified the locations. We're not going to go with one company or one product. We're going to experiment with multiple products, see which ones we like that work the best. We're partnering with a local university to identify the pavement performance as well as the heat mitigation potential. And we're also collaborating with the local university to identify more of the high priority neighborhoods so that the city has a better strategy moving forward. And so that'll kick off later this summer. We'll have the results by the end of this year. And the idea is to use one of the better performing products long-term as part of our city operations. Now, there is typically a price premium for cool pavement. And so we've looked at, okay, well, what's the delta between the cool pavement versus the black asphalt? And can we use our climate action fund to pay or finance that delta? So we have a couple of things ongoing, but overall, that's our strategy moving forward.
Lots of great work, pilot projects, programs, public-private partnerships, and overall funding. And that leads nicely to Salvador and talking about funding here. And we've seen some significant federal level acts recently that have come down and providing capital. I mean, looks like a drop in the bucket, lots of money going many different places. But Salvador, from your role and your exposure, what do you see taking place in the world of investing, in the increased investments or interest in investments within ESG, climate change technology, and then maybe public-private partnerships?
Yes, thank you. So just as context, again, we have an environmental infrastructure mandate. We work only along the border, and that is defined as 62 miles into the U.S. So it's a pretty big territory if you count Mexico, of course. And we have a very diverse type of communities going from San Diego, all on its own. Then we have the El Pasos, the Laredos, which are significantly big, significant capacity. But then, of course, we have a lot of very small communities in colonias with very different challenges and opportunities. It is interesting that in 1994, when we were created, climate change vulnerability was rarely mentioned. It was more of an academic topic, which is interesting because I don't think I'm that old, right? But even when I went to school, it was kind of like secondary field, if you will. But we see how that has come to the forefront and how in the time the bank's been around, we have evolving from basic infrastructure, water, wastewater, solid waste, later into renewable energies. But now really the focus is obviously in water, and I'll talk about that more, but also in the whole green economy concept, right? And that includes some of the things that were alluded in the previous panel, such as clean transportation, green buildings. Important to us is the border crossings, particularly for trade, where you have cities like Laredo. I keep forgetting the number, but it's thousands and thousands of trucks crossing the border every day, idling for hours, and of course creating both local pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. So the focus of the bank now is to try to work on the whole green economy concept. Water, of course, continues to be at the forefront, particularly when it comes to vulnerability, having too much water or having too little water. But again, we try to look at it holistically. So this approach creates both challenges and opportunities. The challenge, of course, is that, as we've heard this morning, there's never seems to be enough money. Grants are always welcome. They never enough. And then, of course, trying to finance a rate via public debt is not easy for a number of reasons we all know, whether it's just a low debt capacity of communities, low revenues, and of course the political will, but even just the institutional capacity to develop the projects, to have solid bidding processes, and so forth. So what we try to do at the bank is to support a lot of this project development, the handholding, and then of course at the end of the day we'd like to issue a loan, which by the way we have plenty of money, which is kind of an irony, right? That sometimes what what is not always, but sometimes what is really missing is a pipeline of projects and the capacity to get them done. We also administer a couple of grant programs. The most important one comes from EPA. It's called the Border Environment Infrastructure Fund, or BEIF. And that is a project that we use to fund, again, basic water, wastewater infrastructure on both sides of the border. There's an interest from the U.S. in funding some Mexican projects because of the transboundary impact in terms of wastewater flow and so forth. So again, the grants are limited. The loans are a little difficult to issue sometimes. And as you say, there's some good news with the IRA and the greenhouse gas fund, which I believe is about $27 billion, if I recall correctly. And then the environmental justice block program, another $3 billion or so that I'm not sure anyone really knows how this is going to pan out, but of course that's something we're tracking and see if that some of those funds can go to the border region. On the opportunity side, on the other hand, is that these bigger emphasis on climate vulnerability and climate change also creates investment opportunities for us, not only from the public sector, but from the private sector. And we've all heard about nearshoring and how that's creating more pressure for real estate, for roads, for water, for energy. We see that very clearly on the Mexican side. I don't know if you've heard the news about the new Tesla factory going into Mexico. A big consideration was in Monterey, where you have the industrial ecosystem and the suppliers and so forth. Are you going to have enough water, right? So water and climate are becoming a real consideration for investors. That's, I guess, part of where the ESG comes in. So again, along with the challenges we face, I think these trends, at least for NADBank, create opportunities. And let me stop there, Kyle.
Well, very comprehensive and a big role that you have, obviously, going from California here to Texas. Just following on that, what unique complexities do you have here in Texas, or opportunities, if you will, that maybe differ from, say, New Mexico, Arizona, or California? Are there special funds or policies established to help with Texas, or are they uniform from, say, San Diego here to South Texas?
So our programs are, as far as the bank programs goes, they're the same. Of course, each state has peculiarities, and Chairwoman Pop talked about Texas this morning. For us in Texas, the challenges are, again, if you look at the border region, especially west from here, just a lack of water. It's a big challenge. And there's cities like El Paso who have managed to have a pretty diverse water source, right, including groundwater desalination, a lot of conservation, and even more of your traditional big pipelines bringing water from somewhere else. But then in the rest of the border region, you have a lot of smaller communities and colonias with, again, the challenges are just plain and simple: lack of money, lack of resources. When the grants are not available, the debt capacity is non-existent almost. And sometimes you go there, they don't even have financial audits, for example. So it's very hard to work with them to funnel the money. And again, that's where our technical assistance support comes in. We're always, the BEIF, the EPA program that I mentioned, has been very, very successful. We're trying to see how that can be expanded. I was here on Monday, actually, because we're exploring with different state governments whether some of these funds that were mentioned this morning, whether a portion of that can go to the border communities. How do you tie the environmental justice aspect to it, and so forth.
Thank you, Salvador. Some great thoughts. I'm sure you have a lot of questions here in the break area afterward. Mark, turning back to you, and you mentioned some technologies. How do we as a community come together and choose the right technologies when this 50 years from now, we don't know what the climate's exactly going to look like? Certainly the population of Texas is only going to grow. We have a lot of constraints in many different areas, whether it be water or electrical grid, just infrastructure more broadly. But how is that a challenge that the city of Austin is looking at in terms of choosing the right technologies? And then pass that over to you, Johanna.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm going to go with Salvador's discussion around water. As you said correctly, like we either have too much or too little, and it usually comes too fast, or then we don't get it for a long time. It's going to be really hard to engineer ourselves out of that. Like we're not going to have an engineer solution for this. And I think we need to rethink how water functions within the community And to really start to focus more on green space, on green ecosystem services, and sort of figure out how the green infrastructure could help us get there. But that also gets to who accesses that space, who accesses those services. And I think that's where it's key to work with the community to determine like how to make that happen. We started to say this term of no data without stories and no stories without data. We have a lot of data when it comes to technology, when it comes to engineering. We don't have that much data when it comes to community experience, the lived experience. So what we want to do is start to look at like, how do you bring in the community into those discussions, into the decision making, into the collection of data, into sort of like visioning what their community is going to look like in the future. And that is critical. Like if we're not doing the right thing at the right place with the right people, that we're going to make mistakes and make things worse. And we can't afford to make mistakes now. As I mentioned before, we're having these more and more of these events. If we don't bring in that lived experience, then we're going to keep on making these mistakes going forward. Technology is key. Like if you vision a future where everybody's safe and things are great, we can't do it without technology. I love technology. I love my phone. Like, we start to integrate into our daily lives, but we can't let that drive us. Like we have to bring in the lived experience. We have to bring in people's stories to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right place.
Yeah, and actually to follow up on that point, right, even today, there's actually a really wonderful symposium going on over in this very same campus with Planet Texas 2050 that y'all might be familiar with. And if you're not, I definitely recommend checking out that program where they're talking about all kinds of different projects that they're doing around how do we deal with climate change, specifically in Texas. And one of the projects that they talked about yesterday is using a social science method called photo voice, where they engage with people in communities that are highly impacted and have them tell stories in their own words using photographs, going out and photographing different issues that they see and then talking about it and then, kind of expanding on those conversations. So there's a lot of really interesting ways to gather this information, but also remembering not to be just gathering information, right? To actually be active partners and collaborative and co-creating with the community. And to just kind of take it a little bit slightly different direction as well to answer your question, I think, flexibility is really important. There's designing for multiple different outcomes to the extent that you can. I think that there was something about that I was going to mention. It might come to me in a moment. But one of the things going on at UT right now is looking at using computer models to look at 100 different scenarios and then put in different mitigation techniques, see which ones of those fails the least often with all these different scenarios, right? And so they're not in the sort of ready to go stage where folks can actually use it on the ground, but they're getting there. They're starting to really, pilot it or hoping to pilot it with different folks. And I hope I'm not, revealing anything too early, but I think it's really exciting some of the research that's happening to help support folks in this decision-making process to decide which technologies and which methods to use.
Great point. And way to bring in other programs as well, Joanna. Murray, going back to you for a moment, you mentioned going out there and going to the community and looking at these heat islands and, evaluating different solutions that may take place there. How much is data really underpinning a lot of San Antonio's work? And you're in a growing market as well, certainly. So lots of vulnerable communities, and you want to include them for that inclusion and making sure that it works for that community. How is San Antonio evaluating what options may take place? And I know we didn't discuss this before, but is AI a part of your future considerations as well?
For San Antonio, data is vital. So with our UHI task force, it's the Office of Sustainability and our Office of Innovation. We're key partners that drive that. So we have a couple of different tools we can use through the Office of Innovation. They have funding and they have what's called a research portal. So depending on the challenges, if it's extreme heat in one neighborhood or it's extreme heat in downtown, we can post that challenge and open it up to local universities to kind of pitch their idea. And then we evaluate it, we pilot it, we see if it works. If it fails fast, and we'll try something else. But yeah, we, as part of this new collaboration, the task force, what we're realizing is there's 10 departments. Some of us have really similar data sets. Some of them are newer, some of them are older. And so it's really how do we use the data? So we have surface temperature data, for example. We have equity scores, which combines poverty with the percentage of people of color in different census tracts. We've worked with Metro Health to collect asthma rates in various census tracts, heat-related deaths, illnesses. And so now as we're starting to collect all these data sets, we're working with the Southwest Research Institute to do what's called like a data fusion. And what we're looking at is what's the process or the formula moving forward for selecting pilots? Are we going to look at just equity and heat? Are we going to look at equity, heat, and air pollution? And then what's the breakdown of each? Is it 40% heat, 40% equity, 20% air pollution? That we're still working with and experimenting with. But for our pilots data, it was all data driven. And that'll be the process moving forward. In terms of AI, we're open to different solutions. That may be something we post on our research portal to see, hey, can we learn anything new? We have surface temperature data. That's the best available data right now, but it's really old school. It only tells us what the surface temperature is. It doesn't tell us what the ambient air temperature is. So we're also looking at modeling and seeing, well, what is the actual air temperature of San Antonio? Does it correlate with the surface temperature? And that's where AI may come into play.
Wonderful. Thank you for that comprehensive answer as well. So 4 minutes here, like the previous panel, it's kind of quick fire here. 60 seconds or so. What is the lasting comment or thought you would like to leave with our audience? We can start with you, Joanna, and work our way down to Mark, Salvador.
All right. Well, I think one thing is just co-benefits. Look at the solutions that really have benefits in multiple different arenas, and that can be both reducing carbon and becoming more resilient. Like things like weatherization hit so many different, check so many different boxes, and a lot of nature-based solutions as well. I think sometimes technology is exciting, but I think sometimes we forget that the original technology is our natural systems that's been regulating our planet for, as long as we've been around and long before that as well. And so we need to support those systems and work with them to, keep regulating our climate to the extent that we still can.
I would say mental health in the community for sure, but also your mental health. I mean, we work in this space day in, day out, and we think about all the bad things that could happen to us. I think we need to sort of switch that and say, who can I talk to that I haven't talked to make a difference? Like maybe I should reach out to the banks. Maybe I should reach out to San Antonio and Dallas, and like, who else should I be talking to? And how do I turn that into a positive? Because all too often, these events are happening so often, we get pulled into it. All of a sudden there's a blame game. And it's like, how do we get out of this cycle and really start to make a difference?
Thank you. Well, my takeaway is just the interrelationship and the interplay within among all the different aspects we've been talking this morning, right? Water, energy, mobility, transportation, the built environment, and then of course, economic prosperity, economic activity. And we feel that there's a lot of opportunity to incorporate a more efficient, cleaner, greener, and more equitable aspects to all of those things. So I think a lot of the momentum is there to try to move in that direction, and hopefully we can all capitalize on it.
And I would say heat mitigation requires multiple tools. Each person has different expertise, has a different tool, hammer, wrench, etc. And to resolve it or to make significant difference, it requires collaboration across the board.
Great. And the term watershed moment was brought up at the start of this panel. And I think that is applicable in many ways. But if you look at the definition of a watershed moment, it really is a turning point, right? And here we are in a post-pandemic environment. We look at some of the extreme weather we've had. It is truly a watershed moment. What was in the past is no longer in the future. We have to have flexibility. We know that it's going to be different. So I think that when we reflect upon where we are today, we are truly in a watershed moment here in 2023. And I think there is going to be a new path forward for us. So on that point, I just really want to thank the panel here. And once again, we have a 20-minute break after this with coffee out there in the foyer. Oh, all right. One more session. Change of plans here. So if you could, please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.